Welcome to this new crash course on the most pivotal moments in Colombia's recent history. I'm going to talk about the 2016 peace agreement. So we're going to dive a little bit into the historical truth, the context of the Colombian armed conflict, and as well to explore some of the establishment of the Truth Commission and break down their final report. But before all that, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Maria Paula Puerto. I was born in Bogotá, Colombia, and as a girl who grew up shortly after the most critical times of the armed conflict in the country, I was able to realize how difficult these transition periods were for most Colombians outside of big cities. Even though I was born in Bogotá, most of my family is from the countryside, and the division and the difference is very, very present even nowadays. The reason why I decided to dive into this project was the lack of information that is available to most Anglophone people or people who live outside of Latin America. So the objective of this video essay is to guide and educate you on a subject that is very entrenched in Colombian culture. It is also what I think a very personal video, as most of my family members still remember what it was like to live during this epitome of the armed conflict and the struggle and the fear anywhere you went. Perhaps the most scary years of their lives was also when this was happening. So I hope to shed some light and knowledge over a subject that, although is very hurtful to some, may also bring peace and hopefully hope to most. As of right now, Colombia is trying to build itself again from being one of the most violent countries in the 20th century to being a country that sets a precedent to other countries that are still struggling with armed conflict in 2024. So let's get started. So with that acknowledgement to this portion of victims, I would like to start with some historical background, setting the stage up for what's coming. So to understand the significance of the 2016 peace agreement, we need to go back a few decades. Colombia's internal armed conflict began approximately in the 1960s, and it rooted in the political and the economic inequalities, the land disputes, and the state neglect of rural areas. The conflict as well, it involved multiple actors. So it was initially the government, paramilitary groups affiliated to the government, and guerrilla organizations, the most important and crucial being the FARC, or the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. So this became one of the longest running conflicts in the Western Hemisphere, as it lasted over 50 years. It caused a lot of human suffering. More than 260,000 people were killed, 7 million people were forcibly displaced, and tens of thousands of people disappeared. So the conflict's economic toll was staggering as well, costing Colombia billions of pesos in lost productivity and infrastructural damage. The violence disproportionately affected rural communities, with indigenous and Afro-Colombian populations bearing the brunt of most attacks. Over the years, peace seemed very elusive, with multiple failed negotiations and continuing cycles of violence. As well, you can add the horrible exposition that the country had to drug dealing and people like Pablo Escobar or the Gacha brothers in the early 90s, creating this very torment force of violence around the country. However, in 2016, a breakthrough occurred when the Colombian government and the FARC reached a comprehensive peace agreement after 4 years of negotiations in La Habana, Cuba. So this is our second segment. I want to talk a little bit more about the 2016 agreement, what was going on there, give a little overview of what the scene was in 2016. So, the 2016 peace agreement was a multifaceted framework designed to address the root causes of the conflict and ensure a transition to peace. So, some of the key provisions included disarmament, rural reform, political participation, justice, and reconciliation. I'm going to talk a little bit about each point. So, for the disarmament, the FARC agreed to lay down their weapons under international supervision, which meant that by 2017, over 8,000 members of the FARC were completely disarmed and trying to get back into society. The rural reform was composed by addressing the land inequality as well as the redistribution of the land, improving their infrastructure, and providing resources for agricultural development. Their political participation seemed a little bit more brutal for some, but necessary for others, including me. The FARC transitioned into a political party, which meant that the commission became an alternative revolutionary force known as PARES, and it secured seats in Congress for, I believe, 2 electoral cycles. So 2020 and 2024. There's secured seats in the Congress. And finally, we have justice and reconciliation, which established basically a transitional justice mechanism called the Jurisdiction for Peace and the Truth Reconciliation to address human rights violations. The HIP is very unique in its own way, as no other peace process had started a Jurisdiction for Peace Commission, which sets a precedent for many other peace agreements in the world. And although a lot of people, including me, were very excited to see how this was going to work through, and its ambitious goals sounded very, very hopeful, there has been a lot of challenges in the implementation. So according to the Kroc Institute for Peace, as of 2023, only 30% of the agreement's provisions have been fully implemented. There have been a lot of delays in land reforms and the reintegration programs for people. They have been completely hindered, and the violence against social leaders and ex-combatants remains a critical point, with over 1,000 leaders assassinated since 2016. Despite this, the Truth Commission that was established in 2016 has very much approached the whole process as, an imperative justice system that really tries to uncover the truth and bring back the voices of the victims and amplifying them and promoting societal healing. So, zooming into a more clear way of understanding how the Truth Commission works, I would like to point out that in Spanish it's called La Comisión de la Verdad, and it operated from a specific period of time between 2018 and 2022 as a part of the transitional justice framework of the peace agreements. So as I mentioned the objectives before, I'm going to dive into them a little bit more. So Truth Commission, they required to uncover the truth behind investigating causes of conflict, the dynamics of it, and the consequences that both victims and combatants felt throughout the 50 years of conflict. They also needed to amplify the victims' voices, which gave visibility to the experiences of these marginalized groups. And they often tried to promote societal healing, meaning they had a lot of events running, both private and public, to foster dialogue and reconciliation. I was very lucky to go to one of those dialogues with the mothers of Soacha, Las Madres de Soacha. It was such an embraceful moment that really made me, very much reflect upon what it meant to be born in a country like Colombia, a country that has seen so much violence, yet there's so much resilience in the entire society. So as well, they often tried to promote this societal healing, which meant the world to the victims and as well to regular citizens as me. So in numbers, the commission collected over 30,000 testimonies from victims, survivors, and even former combatants. This included 36,000 interviews with women, 3,600, interviews with women, 1,000 with indigenous population, and 500 with Afro-Colombian communities. In addition to these testimonies, the commission conducted both regionals and thematic hearings to address specific issues like sexual violence, forced displacement, and child recruitment, as well as some more cultural activities like artistic initiatives such as murals and theatric performances that were also employed to create another narrative of truth-telling, giving a more inclusive and accessible space to victims who were not able to testify in a regular way. And unlike legal tribunals, the Truth Commission's focus was completely restorative, which emphasizes our reconciliation and understands over punishment. So this approach aimed to create a collective mode of justice and pave the way to societal reform. So in 2022, we can talk about the Truth Commission's final report. It was a comprehensive document divided into thematic volumes. Some of the key findings we have on it are the root causes, the victimization, the drug trafficking, and the notable never again call, which in Spanish translates to nunca jamás. So to dive into these key findings, I would like to emphasize that personally, I have not read the entirety of the Truth Commission's final report, but I did dive into some specific notings that I found very insightful for the video. So with the root causes, we of course found that structural inequality in land dispossession probably were one of the main reasons for people to join the armed forces, as well as just government neglect as a major drive for people in the rural outskirts of the country. We can also find victimization, as over 80% of the victims throughout the armed conflict were civilians, which underscored the conflict's devastating impact on non-combatants. Let's say around 300,000 people were killed. That means that over 240,000 of these people were citizens, civilians, who had absolutely nothing to do with the conflict. They were unfortunately just there. Wrapping your head around that number is extremely confusing, as well as you understand that there is so much behind just claiming that people do it for the power or for violence. It was more of just understanding that the conflict came from within the government and the lack of approach the government had for its citizens throughout a very long period of time. Finally, the drug trafficking issue, where its only purpose was just the perpetuation of conflict by financing these illegal groups and undermining state authority. So, as the report calls for this never again panorama, it was such a powerful appeal for non-repetition. This non-repetition approach included recommendations such as strengthening the rural development and improving protections for human rights defenders and activists, as well as addressing the perpetuation of inequality and the persistence of it. However, as we all know, implementing these recommendations requires a lot of political power and both social and cultural commitment. Finally, I would love to talk about the challenges and the opportunities that the Commission and the country has seen over a decade later of, peace, reconciliation, and truth. So, where are we now exactly after a decade of the peace agreement? Progress has definitely been uneven, and while the disarmament of the FARC and the establishment of transitional justice mechanisms are considered significant milestones, there is still a lot of victims in many areas. New armed groups have emerged. Illegal economies, including drug trafficking, continue to center the conflict. According to the UN verification mission in Colombia in 2023, it witnessed over 200 killings of human rights defendants and former combatants. These challenges highlight the importance of fully implementing the peace agreement and addressing its delays. Nonetheless, on the bright side, civil society organizations and grassroots movements remained advocating constantly for peace and justice. The Truth Commission's final report served as a valuable roadmap for these efforts, advocating and offering actionable insights and fostering a second hope for the future of Colombia. I would like to point out as a final remark that the impact of the report has been very much influential on public discourse, especially with this new cycle of presidential elections happening in a year. It has sparked a lot of debates on land reform around the country and the need to protect vulnerable communities and communities, as well as internationally. It has been recognized as a model, a very, very good model for post-conflict truth-telling. Yes.
And that is a wrap on this initial crash course. The 2016 Peace Agreement and the Truth Commission are clearly very powerful examples of how society can strike a deal after conflict. Of course, while challenges remain, the pursuit of truth and justice offers hope for a more peaceful Colombia. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe for more